Voyagers decided to become a taxi and picked up some passengers from a species called the Inaran. We're going to drop them off at a planet along the way, their homeworld according to two of our guests, who I'm going to call Miss Green and Miss Grey, in the hopes that they don't change clothes during the episode. In exchange for the lift, they're giving us some energy efficiency tech, but we're having issues adapting it to our own system. Of course, that might be due to some members of the team being more interested in each other than the task at hand. After Miss Grey and B'Elanna excuse themselves, Kim and Miss Green depart to have dinner and get to know each other better, which is incredibly brave of Kim considering the writers haven't given him a personality yet. It seems they're not the only ones getting it on. B'Elanna wakes after hearing a knock on the window, which either means she's not on Voyager anymore or the person knocking is in a spacesuit. The answer is the former, as she opens the window and an alien Romeo climbs through it. None of that rose by any other name stuff here, and we get straight to sexy times. Or would if Chakotay didn't choose now to wake B'Elanna up because it was just a dream. She's late for her shift, so he came to check on her, coincidentally giving me an opportunity to use the pun Chacoitus interruptus. She hurries off to get ready, but doesn't seem entirely upset at the reason for being late. On the way to engineering, we learn this is the second time she's overslept. Chakotay's concerned there might be something wrong, so she confides in him. Funny thing though, the guy in her dreams is both someone she's never met and from the species we're giving a lift to, which is a curious coincidence, so I'm going with psychic shenanigans. On the plus side, that might mean Kez gets a decent part this week. After a conspiratorial giggle, and B'Elanna threatening to kill him if he tells anyone, Chakotay leaves. Paris and Kim are on their way to the mess hall. It seems Neelix has laid on something a bit special for our guests, an Inaran-themed evening. He's adapted the decor, the food, and even the temperature to make them feel welcome. Kim's invited over to join Miss Green, with Miss Grey paying attention in the background, so that's where my money's going for the psychic shenanigans. Janeway's watching a man gently stroke the instrument in his lap. He finishes and Janeway compliments him on his technique, but he says the thanks must go to Miss Grey, who taught him that particular performance. He offers Janeway the chance to play with it herself, and she eagerly accepts his proposition. He guides her in the correct amount of pressure and speed to use while Miss Grey watches, but there's been a misunderstanding, and Janeway calls a halt as she didn't know this would be done with him sharing his knowledge via telepathy, called it. Oh, now that I read that back, this all runs the risk of sounding filthy, so to let you know that wasn't the writer's intention, we end this scene with a shot of Neelix showing Chakotay how to properly cup his balls. B'Elanna's having an early night. In her dream, she's being admonished for socializing with Romeo by someone I presume is her dream father. He leaves and Romeo stops hiding in the other room so we can get down to more sexy times. The dream goes south though, and not in a good way, as Romeo turns into deep-fried Romeo, scaring B'Elanna awake. She mentions this to Chakotay whilst giving him a progress report, saying that each new dream feels like a chapter in a story. Chakotay wonders if maybe the people with brain powers that we invited on board just when this started to happen might have something to do with it. He suggests asking Miss Green about it to see if she has any answers. A fair plan, but on the way, B'Elanna has a waking dream in which she's attending a ceremony hosted by her father for what looks like the Inaran equivalent of Starfleet Academy. There's a mention that some Inarans, regressives, aren't too happy about their planet's progress on space travel. Romeo turns up in secret, saying he wanted to be there for her big day before leaving through a checkpoint of some sort that scans his ID, which is certainly an interesting way to remain secret. We jump back to Voyager to find B'Elanna unconscious on the floor of engineering, with a concerned Kez over her. To sick bay, where the doc tells us the dreams aren't really dreams at all, but telepathically implanted memories, and each one is causing physical damage to her brain. He can give her a flashy gizmo to stop the dreams, but she's initially hesitant, and there's some question here over whether it's curiosity or personal investment. The doc talks her into using it, and Janeway gives her a couple of days off to rest. I'm sure being alone in her quarters with a desire to see the story through won't be a cause of temptation, and we have nothing to worry about. But before that, let's have a chat with our musical guest and see if he can shed light on events. He's appalled at the suggestion that this could happen without the consent of both parties. I mean, okay, he did it earlier with Janeway proving that it's physically possible, but that was a mistake on his part. His people don't force memories onto others. That'd be rude. There is another possibility. Some races can be affected by the background shenanigans they broadcast, a bit like how a radio station might get overridden by a powerful local signal as you drive through it. It's possible she's picked up these background memories from multiple people, and her brain organized them into a story to try and make sense of them. It's all so very plausible, and yet the faint whiff of bullshit is enough for both Janeway and Tuvok to detect. Just because they'll be gone in a day doesn't mean we can't do a little more digging, right? Not you though, B'Elanna. You need to go and isolate yourself in your room, away from everybody that'll stop you from removing the flashy gizmo. That's the safest course of action for you. B'Elanna's in her room, and, in a shocking turn of events, decides to remove the flashy gizmo on her neck. Tangentially, we learned a few episodes ago in flashback that these things are connected to sickbay and can update them on changes in the patient's status, but I guess the doc didn't turn that feature on this time, for reasons. Into the memories we go, and find B'Elanna talking to her dad. She asks him if he's sure that the people they're resettling definitely want to go, so I guess we're about to do some atrocities. He reassures her that it's definitely 100% voluntary, then goes through a list of reasons why they're backwards scum who deserve it, and also it's totally not voluntary. Cut to a scene of her dad reading names off a list while people are dragged away, and I'm beginning to think that her graduation ceremony was less Starfleet Academy and more Allgemeine Schutzstaffel. We need a way to make her the victim though, so let's put Romeo's name on the list. He's not there, so B'Elanna and Dad have an argument about him being the one who put Romeo's name down. It's interrupted by someone running through the checkpoint and bonking B'Elanna in the face, which causes her to wake up. She's figured it out now, though, and goes to visit Miss Grey, whose facial scar matches B'Elanna's dream. It seems Miss Grey's had a bit of a tumble, but resists being taken to sickbay. Passing on the rest of her memories, her guilt and involvement, is more important to her. She says she wanted the truth to be known, but that people found out she was sharing her memories, calling into question whether her tumble was accidental. No time for that, though, as she needs to pass on the rest of her story. Memory B'Elanna is at home playing the half a beach ball guitar when she's interrupted by a knock at the window. It's Romeo, and he's come to take her away so they can be together. He tries to tell her that there is no resettlement, that the transports leave but never arrive, that the people on board are never heard from again, and I didn't realise that my earlier guess was going to be quite so on the nose. She resists, unable to accept that her father could be part of that. The conversation is interrupted by her father knocking, and she hides Romeo before inviting him in. Her father reasons with her, telling her that this conspiracy, death on such a scale, genocide, could not possibly be happening among a people so advanced as they. He tells her it's lies. He tells her Romeo is manipulating her. He tells her that he's seen Romeo with other girls, manipulating them too. In tears, she looks at the curtains separating them from the room Romeo is hiding in, and her father investigates and detains him. We cut to the courtyard that held B'Elanna's graduation and watch as Romeo is tied up whilst being screamed at by a baying crowd. B'Elanna looks on as he's killed, before joining in the chant herself. Switch to a later memory in the same courtyard with B'Elanna acting as a guide, telling some children that the regressives all chose to move away, but that they died out because they were so backwards. B'Elanna wakes to find Miss Grey lying on the floor, dead. In the mess hall, Voyager is holding a farewell party for the Inaran. Our guest musician offers a toast to the hosts, at least until one of us accuses them of genocide, and him specifically of murder. B'Elanna tells everybody gathered about the memories she was given by Miss Grey about the atrocities committed by their race. But it's rare to find people willing to hear about their own unpleasant histories. I should know, I'm British. Miss Green pushes back on the idea, rejecting it outright. The musician suggests that the memories of Miss Grey were false, as she'd been ill for some time, or that B'Elanna was misinterpreting them. But B'Elanna's not buying that shit, and says as much, causing the musician to tell Janeway that he intends to depart with his group after visiting Miss Grey in the morgue. B'Elanna's in Janeway's ready room. She's apologising for the sudden nature of her outburst, but there's no anger in Janeway over it. B'Elanna's pushing to investigate the matter formally, to visit the planet and look for evidence, but Janeway knows that won't work. They have no authority to get involved. They can't even argue it's part of an investigation into a crime committed on Voyager, as the doc can't find any proof to support Miss Grey having been murdered. They have no choice but to let it go. That said, Janeway does mention to her that there are still a few Inaran in engineering collecting their equipment, in case she wants to say goodbye. Down in engineering, Miss Green has little time for talking to B'Elanna, but that's fine as it's B'Elanna who wants to do the talking. She tells Miss Green that if B'Elanna's lying, it shouldn't be that hard to prove. After all, if the regressives really did die out rather than be exterminated, there should be evidence of their settlements, records of people who transported them there, manifests for cargo. If this really is all a mistake, finding that proof would settle things once and for all. B'Elanna tells her it's a shame that she doesn't have the same skills as the Inaran, as she'd simply share those memories with Miss Green. Thing is, she can. Miss Green can make the connection for her and access the memories that way. It's a bit odd that nobody thought of it at the party, but better late than never, I suppose. They connect, and Miss Green starts to experience the first memory Miss Grey implanted in B'Elanna, as we fade to black. Now, I don't usually do a post-credits analysis of episodes, but I think this one should be an exception because, for the life of me, I can't decide how I feel about Miss Grey. You could argue that she was used by her father, but even if she believed he was right, even if Romeo was an utter shit, none of the others were. One of the constants in our own history is that hate makes people easy to manipulate, but that doesn't release them from responsibility for their actions. She was complicit in the genocide of those people not once but twice, first of their lives, then of their history, by lying about it. Her actions are abhorrent, and they're compounded by living with them for so many years when she could have shared them publicly, choosing only to do so when her own life was almost spent. But then, by sharing her memories, she chose to make herself the public face of those atrocities to the entirety of her race, for as long as they have a recorded history. She will be forever remembered not only as a symbol of barbarism, but also as the very definition of cowardice and shame for remaining silent when those responsible could have still been held to account. And she must have known this. She knew she was destroying herself. She knew she was making herself a pariah. I've always struggled with the concept of absolution, the idea that you can do whatever you want as long as, before you die, you tell a designated person about it. It is, in essence, a transaction where you sell your confession in exchange for a key to whatever heaven you believe in. It seems so utterly at odds with the concepts of morality and social responsibility. But I can't tell if her final act was just a selfish attempt at absolution, or whether it was born of genuine remorse. Was she simply buying her key, or trying to make sure that those who came after her would never need to buy one themselves? I don't know. End of episode.